Good morning, guys, and welcome to the show. Fernando.
Welcome to the show.
Today we have a little bit of a throwback. Back to the days when it's just like, hey man, just put a radio in my car.
An F-150.
Not an F-150.
A Jeep.
Not a Jeep.
I don't know any other car.
Toyota Tundras. We do a lot of Toyota Tundras.
Yeah, not this one.
Is an older Toyota Tundra. People are definitely keeping their cars a lot longer than they had in the past. We know this because we're doing a lot of radio swaps still, even though they say the radios are dying. A lot of you guys are still like, hey, I'm gonna keep this thing. I really like it. I just want a new radio.
I love my car.
Exactly. So today we're going to take you through the process of just doing a basic radio upgrade on an older vehicle. The things you need to do, some of the things you need to look out for, some of the things you shouldn't do, and whatnot. Ready?
Roll the intro.
Let's take a look at the inside of this vehicle and see what we have to deal with. We can kind of see why he would like to replace it. It's got a CD, it's got a cassette, it has no Bluetooth, has no steering wheel controls, there's no aux jack anywhere on here. I mean, he probably should have updated it 10 years ago, but it's here today. It's gonna get some CarPlay, Android Auto action. What do we need to do first, Fernando?
Well, we have to go and find out what are we going to need to replace this radio.
There's a couple different websites that we use, pack-auto.com, metroonline.com, idatalink.com. For this, we're gonna go over to metroonline.com and see what they list for parts. The reason why we wanna do that is they have an extensive amount of information for disassembling dashes. They have some of the best instructions out there for doing that, and it's the largest database to do that, so that's a great place to start. Let's head to the laptop. When you're on the website, type in your make, model, year, if there is any submodels like an LT, TRD, whatever you have. If you have something like that, make sure you type that in because that's important. It's really important. For example, like a Rogue versus a Rogue Sport, two totally different cars, totally different electrical systems. Here, it tells us that we're just gonna need a pocket. There's no actually right and left brackets. This is a big like ding 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 ding. You really have to pay attention to this on some of these older vehicles. If they don't have any mounting brackets listed or a dash kit that's listed, they just have like a pocket. If you don't have the factory radio, you're going to run into problems putting it in. They're telling you right here that you need the factory radio to take the brackets off and reinstall them onto your aftermarket radio. Next up is the harness that you're gonna need. They list two harnesses, the basic 1761 Toyota harness along with the 8113 premium audio harness. A lot of people ask, what harness do I need for my car? What do I need? What do I need? Pull the radio out and look. It's right there. Match up the harness. Right below that, you see the 71 harnesses. Let's say you buy this truck and the radio doesn't work. You take it to somebody like us or yourself and you pull the radio out and you notice that there's no harness. It's been cut. The 71 harness is what you're going to want to buy. You could solder that back in, plug in that factory radio, and or use that to plug into the 70 harness.
Yeah.
That's also how you make a T harness if you're going to be adding, let's say, outboard amplifiers to your factory radio and you want to use high level to low level. Next up is speaker brackets. Metro does have the largest library of speaker brackets for sure. If you're looking for them, the place we go first is Metro, and then we trickle down through the rest of the companies.
Yep.
Yeah. What we know now is that there is no dash kit for this car. We need a factory radio. If we were doing a single DIN, which we're not, we'd need this pocket. We would also need that if, let's say, we want to do a big floating radio that has a single DIN back. We could use this pocket to do that. We need to get the radio out to find out if this was premium audio or non-premium audio. Most of the time, you can click the view details. That'll pull up a picture of the dash kit. Select the instructions. In the instructions, they tell you every car this is compatible with, and they start to walk through and show you how to get every single one of those dashes apart. Step by step. Every single car that this one is compatible with.
I think that's the coolest thing about Metro.
Definitely. For this radio, it's a pretty straightforward removal. There are two Phillips screws located here and here. Depending on the year, you may have to remove these knobs as well. And behind them, there'll be 3 more screws. Be careful when you pull these off. There's these little metal tabs that are on there that hold the 2 pieces together. Sometimes they'll stay on or they'll fall off. With the 5 screws removed, the whole panel will pop off. As you can imagine, these are getting old. Just be careful. Behind it, you'll see the air conditioning and airbag harnesses. You can unplug all of them. A Quick note on airbag. On older vehicles like this, the only cars you really have to worry about are Volvos, because it doesn't matter what year, you just need to disconnect the battery on that. Volkswagens, disconnect the battery on those. Nissans, unplug it, pull the light out of the dash, plug it back into the connector, then you can do whatever you want. Just never turn the key on without the airbag light connected. All the other vehicles, they just reset. Grab your 10mm, remove the 4 screws holding the radio in. Pull it back and unplug it. All right, there you go. Now this is a premium audio system, as you can see right there. This is not a 2-piece harness, so it's not the 1761. It's gonna be the 8113. However, we don't want to use the 8113 in this because we know it's going to sound terrible and give us a ton of engine noise. It's a no-no. Don't ever use it, period. And the reason why, there's actually a factory amplifier located in the dash that we're going to take out. And that is where the 1761 harness is plugged in. This is one of the older units that was actually a 2-piece radio, even though it's an outboard amplifier. That box right there, we want to remove that. There's a screw located here. There's another screw located here. And if you look down there, that little bluish green wire, that is our 1761 harness that we want. It is kind of a pain to get out. You need a long Phillips screwdriver to do it. Got 2 little hooks on it, you just lift it up. There's our 1761 harness. As you can see, the wiring harness is long enough to come up into where the radio is. This is our little nightmare here of inefficiency. If you're asking, wait a minute, how would I know all that? It's gonna be tough. Years of experience in doing this is where we're at on that one.
I think Google is the best place to find out.
Let's head over to the bench. We'll remove the side brackets from the factory radio. We'll build up our harness. We'll talk about doing that. On the side of the factory radio, there's gonna be 4 screws. They're usually a Phillips and or an 8mm. Don't use a drill because these things have been screwed in there for a really long time, and most of the time they're gonna strip. See if you can get them off with just a Phillips, which it's not doing. Move to the 8mm. Just loosen them all up. Now if the 8mm still doesn't work, then you have to do the hammer, where you take the screwdriver like this, put it on, and you tap it lightly with the hammer 100 times, and that will loosen it up also. With the 2 panels off, we're done with this. On the factory brackets, they typically have an L and an R telling you what side is which. This one has an L right here. I like to start on the right side first. Place it on to my aftermarket radio. This is what's called a short chassis radio, so you're only going to get 2 screws to hold this bracket on. Another thing that you want to keep in mind when screwing the radios in, there's 2 types of screws depending on the radio manufacturer. There's a coarse thread and there's a fine thread. Pay attention to that. The easiest way to check is look in the bag of screws that came with the radio you bought and see which one it is. This is a Kenwood. It is a fine thread, which matches up with the screws we just removed from the factory. We can use those to attach our brackets onto our radio. Make sure the screws are good and tight, because we're only going to get 2 on either side. When doing installs where I have to use the factory brackets and there's no trim panel, I like to bring that factory trim panel out and see how well this is going to fill the gap. It's doing a good job. There's no gaps on top, bottom. If there is a gap, what I recommend is getting some 1/8 inch black foam and putting it across the top, back, and sides of the unit. This is the 1761 harness. This is the most popular Toyota harness out there. They still use this today in some capacity in their current vehicles. A lot of the times you'll find this at the factory amplifier still. On it are a bunch of wires of specific colors that do specific things. On the smaller of the 2 harness, you have green and purple. Green is the driver's rear door. Purple is the passenger rear door. There is a solid color and the same color with a black stripe on it. The solid color is positive, the black stripe is negative. Moving over to the bigger harness, white is driver's front door, gray is passenger front door, same solid stripe combination. Black ground. Pay attention to this one. When you plug this in, when you test fit it, make sure that there is a wire on the other side of this. Some of the older vehicles there is not, and how they actually ground is through the chassis of the radio when it screws in. If there isn't a ground wire, I strongly recommend running your own ground wire somewhere into the car. There's a nice big solid metal bar behind the the radio. This is also really common in Nissans. Red is key. When you turn the key on and off, this gets 12 volts. This is what turns on and off the radio. Yellow is constant or memory. Orange-white is illumination. This will dim the radio when the headlights turn on. Does not work off the rocker switch, meaning you can't dim it to match the dash. Most radios have some form of dimmer control built into them, so you can go into their menu systems and turn them up or down. This just triggers that. Then there's a blue wire, and this one has a little loop here at the base. The blue wire on this is amplifier and antenna turn on. However, if you cut this, they separates them out to their corresponding things. One is amplifier turn on, the other one is power antenna turn on. A lot of Toyotas don't use either one of these. I like to plug it in and see if it's there. If it's not there, just remove it. Quick jump into the vehicle to plug our harness in to check our wiring. If there's nothing on the other side of those blue wires, that means I can remove them. Checking the ground, it does have a ground. Connecting the two harnesses together are where a lot of people kind of struggle. Some people think it's okay to take the two wires, twist them together, grab some black tape of any kind and just and done. It's a wire-to-wire solution, sure, but it's not the best insulation. The problem you run into has to do with the heat rating on the tape. Most tapes fall apart when it gets hot, especially here in Florida. Black tape doesn't last all that long and will eventually roll off and fall into the dash, and then what you end up with is exposed wires. Not a good idea. Next, you have crimp caps. Crimp caps are little connectors that you do the same idea. You twist the wire together, you put it over, then you take your crimper and you crimp it. It's a wire-to-wire solution that works really well. It's simple enough to do, and you'll get a good connection from it. Downside to it, and a lot of people frown upon it, is that you end up with this giant ball of connectors here that no one will ever see, and as long as it fits in your dash, you still have a solid connection. The next connection style is using some form of butt connector. Butt connectors make it a little bit cleaner look in that it's going to line the harness up. The problem some people have with butt connectors is that you're relying on whatever the butt connector is made of to join the two together. So you're crimping on one side, you crimp it on the other. You don't have a wire-to-wire solution, you have something between them. The last is using solder. Twisting the wire together, adding a drop of solder, sliding a piece of shrink wrap over it, heating it up. You have a wire-to-wire solution that is basically glued together with solder, and then you have your shrink wrap over it to protect it. There is a new solution that kind of takes the best of both worlds. They look like butt connectors, but they have a little ball of solder in it. You put the two wire in together, you heat it up, it shrink wraps it and solders it all in one connection. Pick whichever method you want, but just don't use wire nuts. Please do not use wire nuts. These are cars, they move. If you decide to go the shrink wrap way, the size shrink wrap that we use, 1/8 inch for a single wire application and 3/16 for a dual wire app. You might be asking, what do you mean by a dual wire application? A lot of the times we're doing backup cameras where we need to come off of this red wire with a second red wire. So there's two wires next to one another. The 1/8 inch is too thin to go over that. The 3/16 is the perfect size. I like to cut mine about 1.25 inches long. We put them in little containers like this. Strip about 3/8 of an inch of shielding off of the ends of my wire to solder them together. The solder we're going to be using is super solder. The alloy number is 60 and the diameter is 0.8. We get it in a 1-pound roll from Amp Global. Stinger. Picking up your piece of wire with that black stripe, sometimes it's hard to see. I like to roll the wire in my hand like this so that I can see all sides and make sure that I have the right end. Twist the two wires together, make sure that it's nice and tight. A lot of people will twist a whole bunch of them together and like boom boom boom. I don't like to do that. I'm a one wire at a time kind of guy. That way I can concentrate on that one wire. Put the soldering gun underneath, feed the solder into the wire. Move on to the next one. Don't put the heat shrink on while the solder is hot. Give it a second to cool off. Move it as far away from that as you can. Soldering gun underneath. One mistake a lot of people make when soldering is they like to do what I call camping out. They just sit here and heat everything up. You want to be as quick as you can. If you're never soldered onto a speaker, it's not the thing you want to try for your first time. Let it sit for a minute until it's nice and cool. Slide your shrink wrap over it. I like to use a torch. And you're done. Move on to the rest of your wires. Finishing the harness is entirely up to you and how you would like to have it presented. We like to cover ours in exterior Tessa tape over the main run of the wire. What I mean by the main run of the wire, where there's no connections made. This is a main run. There's nothing here, there's no solder, there's no connections, just a solid piece of wire. There's a piece here, there's a piece here, piece here, piece over this. On an end like this, to finish it off and make it look a little bit nicer, put a piece of shrink wrap over it to finish the end. However, if you don't have that, when applying the tape, start on the farthest point and move them in towards the center. So start wrapping here, come in towards the heat shrink. Start wrapping here, come in towards the heat shrink, wrap here all in so that all the ends are here in the center. The reason for that is I don't like to put the same exterior Tessa tape over this point. If I ever need to remove it or service it, I don't want to have to pull all this tape off. I take the fuzzy fleece interior tape at this point and we'll cover this area up. This tells me that underneath this is a solder point, and if I need to get in here and do any work, all I have to do is pull this one little piece of tape off and I have access to it. Same with the speaker side. For at some point we decided to add amplifiers to this and we need to get to this, no problem. I can just peel this piece of tape off that I've added to it and I have access to my speaker wiring. I don't have to remove all this tape trying to find something. This bundle over here that we've added is for if they ever do want to add amplifier and or backup camera. We've added in an accessory, ground, and remote. To finish off the end, we use insulated bullet connectors. The last thing is a couple zip ties to bring the two harnesses together. The reason why it is split into the speaker and the power is because if we did want to add that amplifier, not having it all one big taped up bundle, this will make it easier to do that. A couple zip ties will combine it into one. Where you don't want to put your zip ties at any time is over the area that you soldered together. You don't want to squish all that into one another. Tape is sufficient. This is all set. Let's hop into the truck. We'll put it all together, make sure it works. Match up your plugs. Make sure that all the wire that you ran isn't tangled up and stacked on top of one another. Pay attention to how you're planning on running it. When plugging into the radio, start with the longest wires first. I can't tell you how many times people want to plug the shortest wires in. It just doesn't make any sense. It always helps to have an extra pair of hands, in this case holding the radio while you set it up to screw it in. Plug all your factory harnesses back in, but don't snap the trim bezel back into place. Just kind of let it rest up in place. We want to do some testing to make sure that the radio works before we do our final dash assembly. Our radio is powering up. Go through your quick setup, adjust your clock, your color, all that fun stuff so you don't have to go do it back after the fact. The next thing we want to test is of course our CarPlay to make sure our microphones are working. What's the weather like today?
It's currently clear and 79 degrees.
If you have a backup camera, steering wheel controls, or anything else like that going on, make sure you test those at this point too. If everything passes your test, snap the dash back together, sit back, relax, and enjoy your ride. And with that, we've breathed fresh new life into this 2000 Toyota Tundra. It has all the cool features that a new car has. This thing's good for another 100,000 miles in another 10 years. Right, Fernando?
That is correct. We're gonna be to 300.
Whatever it takes. Alright guys, we hope you found this useful as always. Fernando, if you please.
On to the next one, guys.
You guys have a great night as always. We'll see you later next time.
Bye.
Bye.